After Raimi and Sony could not agree on a direction of Spider-Man 4, they decided to reboot the franchise with Marc Webb and Andrew Garfield bringing their take on the iconic Webhead. Just 5 years after Spider-Man 3 hit theaters. 5 years! In movie years, that's like yesterday. That'd be like if they remade Avengers Endgame today. How soon would that feel? Hi, my name is Zach, and on this channel, movies are not just entertainment, they are experiences. I'm sharing mine, and I would love to hear yours. With that in mind, as I go into ranking the Amazing Spider-Man films, add your rankings down in the comments below. There's only 2 movies, so I know it won't be too difficult, but I want to see first and second from you guys as I share with you my ranking of the Amazing Spider-Man films. With all that said, let's kick this off. In last place, and the runner-up at number 2 is The Amazing Spider-Man. Now look, I was really excited for this movie when it came out. I was in middle school. I was the prime audience for this film, and I actually still enjoy aspects of this film still today. Obviously, Andrew Garfield, Emma Stone, their chemistry is so natural. It's effortless. It is amazing to watch in The Amazing Spider-Man. By far the best part of the movie. On top of that, Andrew Garfield. He's great. He's really good in the role as Peter Parker and as Spider-Man. Acting wise, we'll talk about his character in a little bit here. Andrew just brings that natural charm and charisma to the character that makes him instantly likable. I love the fight between Spider-Man and the Lizard in the high school hallway. That's always been a highlight for me. I love when Spider-Man takes down the undercover cop who he suspects is Uncle Ben's killer. I think Andrew gets some of the best quips and lines in this movie as Spider-Man within this one scene. I can admit there is fun to be had in The Amazing Spider-Man, but even with all that said, as a Spider-Man movie, I don't like it all that much. And I do find myself frustrated by it. Let's go back to Andrew Garfield's performance as Peter Parker. As a performer, he is great. The character of Peter Parker here, not my favorite. I find that Andrew's Peter Parker is miscalculated.
I miscalculated.
Not to the fault of Andrew Garfield, it all comes down to the writing for me. In some ways, it feels like this movie tries too hard to differentiate Andrew from Tobey's Peter Parker by making him a little bit cooler. He's a skateboarder, he's a little bit of a rebel, and of course, he's attractive, but he still can't get the girls. And yet, at the same time, they want us to buy that he's bullied at school and is at the bottom of the food chain, and Flash Thompson just picks on him all day.
Sorry. Morning, Flash.
And it feels like they're trying to blend the outdated traditional view that Raimi and Maguire fully embraced and mixing that with how nerds and geeks are viewed and how they're more mainstream and accepted nowadays. And I just don't find that the two come together naturally. I feel like they more contradict and conflict against each other. And I just find that the character of Peter Parker in this movie doesn't really work for me. It doesn't really resonate with me very much. And like I said, when Garfield is behind the mask, I think he's very good. I have no issues with him behind as Spider-Man. I just have a lot of issues with the way the Spider-Man origin story is displayed in this movie. And the 2 main points that really come up for me go hand in hand together: Uncle Ben's death and the "with great power comes great responsibility" speech. These 2 things are what are at the core of Spider-Man's character, and in this movie, I feel like they fumble it in many ways for me. Let's talk about "with great power comes great responsibility." In this movie, I don't know if they're just trying not to repeat it exactly like Raimi did. They wanted to try to avoid any comparisons to Raimi's, but they make it come out so wordy, and Uncle Ben just kind of prolongs it to the point that these words that are supposed to impact Peter Parker for the rest of his life. In this scene, I feel like Peter is in one ear, out the other. I don't feel like that he listens to this very much at all.
You're a lot like your father. You really are, Peter, and that's a good thing. But your father lived by a philosophy, a principle, really. He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
And it's also not a reference point throughout the rest of the movie. Spider-Man Peter never really seems to go back to this specific conversation for his character. He just kind of moves on and forgets about it. And that just feels like such a miscalculation once again for this movie. And every time I revisit this movie, this scene always makes me annoyed. Going on from this scene, let's talk about Uncle Ben's death. I hate it in this movie. I hate the way that Uncle Ben dies in this movie because he comes across as a gigantic idiot to me, the way that he dies. When the robber is running down the street, trips and his gun slides onto the sidewalk, there's no civilians around. There's no reason why Uncle Ben needs to try and get this gun from this man. But he tries anyways, and what happens? Of course he got shot. This decision to try to have Uncle Ben be the civilian hero just makes him seem like a complete idiot to me. And what's worse is it takes the tragedy of Uncle Ben's death in Peter's life. It lessens that for me because, yeah, it's sad he died, but at the same time, he was so stupid.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
And on top of that, I just don't really like the color palette choice for this movie. I mean, it's Spider-Man. He's colorful. He swings through the city of New York. And this movie wants to treat him as if he's Batman Begins. It's all night. It's all dark. And everything's just darker. And we can't have the colorful, cartoony colors of Spider-Man. We need to be gritty and real. And at times, I can admit that does work in the movie. But overall, it just feels like the obvious wrong choice to me to go about with a Spider-Man movie. And the last gripe that I'll get into with this movie is the lizard.
All these souls, lost and alone, I can save them. I can cure them. There's no need to stop me, Peter. Shut up!
I think the lizard in this movie is the worst live-action on-screen Spider-Man villain that we've ever had. Because Marc Webb doesn't really seem that interested in telling us the lizard's story. He actually has a pretty great setup with him missing his arm and wanting to grow it back and wanting to regain that part of his humanity. But then the movie just kind of forgets about him. He's kind of in the background thought of the rest of the movie until the end where he just is insane. Why is he insane? Why does he want to turn everyone into lizards? Don't know, don't care. It's a Spider-Man movie. I guess we gotta have a Spider-Man villain in this. Whenever I watch The Amazing Spider-Man, I can watch it. It's watchable. I put it on every once in a while, but every time I watch it, I don't feel like Marc Webb was interested in making a Spider-Man movie. I feel like he was interested in making a romance movie between Peter and Gwen, and when he does, he nails it. It's excellent. But as a Spider-Man fan with this movie, I always walk away kind of disappointed. Which brings us to our first place of the two, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Which to some, this could be considered a hot take, because I know a lot of people have The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at the bottom of their entire Spider-Man ranking list. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I love this movie, I think this movie's great, it's amazing, because that would be a lie. I don't love this movie, I don't think it's that good, but as a Spider-Man fan, I enjoy this movie as a Spider-Man movie a lot more than I enjoy The Amazing Spider-Man. To me, this movie comes across as reading a comic story. A messy comic story, but a comic story nonetheless. First off, the issue that I had in the previous movie with the color palette is completely fixed here. This movie is full of color. It is gorgeous. It looks great. When Spider-Man's swinging through the city, I have a gigantic grin on my face. I feel like I'm watching a live-action cartoon of Spider-Man. Negative, positive, you can decide for yourself how you feel about that. For me, it's a positive. And a lot of the way that this movie looks and is directed feels like they brought in a completely different director to do this one. It does not feel like Marc Webb continued from The Amazing Spider-Man. This feels like a reinvention of this franchise, and for me, it was kind of the right direction, at least visually, to take this movie. And with that comes the Spider-Man suit. I love Spider-Man's costume in this. In The Amazing Spider-Man, a lot of people criticize it, saying it looks like a basketball, it doesn't look that great. I kind of like the idea they were going for, trying to make it seem a little bit more homemade by what Peter had available to him. But here, this is a classic Hollywood Spider-Man suit, and it is still my favorite live-action Spider-Man suit that we've gotten on screen. And Andrew wears it so well. Speaking of Andrew Garfield, I like his Peter Parker in this movie more than I like him in the first.
What?
I feel like a lot more of Andrew Garfield's personality got to come out in this movie more than the first one, and his personality, just who he is, really benefits itself to the Spider-Man character. There's also a little bit more of an attempt to tell a story of Peter Parker struggling with his personal life as well as his Spider-Man life. Specifically with Peter trying to distance himself from Gwen because of the death and promise that he made to Captain Stacy that is still haunting him, while also trying to hide his secret identity from Aunt May at home. All of this is just kind of the Spider-Man dynamics that I really love. And of course, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone once again just bring it with their chemistry. Around this time, I believe they were dating, so this is definitely even more natural and even more charming than in the first film. And I didn't think I could get any better than the first film, but here I find them adorable. It is still, without a doubt, my favorite on-screen Spider-Man romance story. And while it is fumbled a little bit by having her insert herself into Spider-Man battle sequences where she has no business of being and she comes across a little bit stupid, the death of Gwen Stacy in this movie is heartbreaking. Now look, the death of Gwen Stacy in the comic books is a pivotal moment in Spider-Man and Peter Parker's life. And I do think that they did the scene too early in the Amazing Spider-Man series. They should have waited till the end of the trilogy to kill off Gwen. It should have been like a big finale moment for this Peter Parker that would have changed him going into Spider-Man 4. But even with that said, the moment in this movie is still the most heartbreaking moment, I think, in any live-action Spider-Man movie. The way that Peter is reaching out to Gwen with his web, they slow it down to show the time slowing down for Peter. Then we cut to Gwen as she closes her eyes, knowing that the impact is coming and Spider-Man is too late. And then, of course, we get the neck snap or the head thud, whatever you want to call it.
Ouch.
And what sells the entire scene is Andrew Garfield's performance at the end when he is holding Gwen in his arms and crying over her body. Just like the first film, I think that everything that Marc Webb does with the Peter and Gwen storyline is great. But we also can't talk about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 without talking about the actual glaring issues that are there within the movie and from the Sony mandates, because they wanted to spin off this movie into a bunch of other Spider-Man villain movies. They wanted to get a Sinister Six movie going. Eventually, all of this morphed into what we now have with Matt Webb, Morbius, and Venom. Yay. But it's true, man. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is incredibly overstuffed. With two main villains with Electro and Harry, and a third sidekick villain with Rhino popping in at the beginning and at the end of the movie, dealing with Gwen and Peter's relationship, Gwen moving away, Peter haunted by her father while investigating into his father and his parents' death, while also trying to reconnect with his childhood friend Harry. I mean, you hear it and it's there. It's messy. It's way too much stuff in this movie. And the movie does buckle and in some cases falls flat on its face trying to hold up the weight of all of these subplots and storylines. But even with all that said, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 I still find watchable and more enjoyable as a Spider-Man film than the first film. I think the action sequences here also got a lot better. I love Spider-Man versus Electro in Times Square. I love the fight at the end with Spider-Man and Electro. I even like Harry and Peter's battle, as short as it may be, in the clock tower before the death of Gwen Stacy. And even though Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man may have let a little too many people die at the beginning of the film while trying to wisecrack with Rhino, I still find the opening of this movie to be a blast, with that entire chase scene of Rhino barreling down the streets of New York and Peter trying to get to his graduation ceremony on time.
Knock, knock. Mr. Criminal. Hey, my name is Spider-Man. You can call me Webhead. You can call me Amazing. Just don't call me late for dinner. You get it?
There's just more moments in this movie that remind me why I love the Spider-Man character than in the first one. So while I don't love either of these movies, of the two, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is my number one pick for the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. It's a shame we never got that third film, but it's also a blessing because it led to Tom Holland and eventually his trilogy and eventually No Way Home, and we'll talk about that soon. With that, guys, that is my ranking of the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, all two movies. How would you rank them? First, second? Comment down below, let me know your list. I'd love to see it. If you want to stick around, we got more videos here for you to check out. And if you haven't heard, we have a goal on this channel. We want to hit 4,000 subscribers for the end of the year. If you like talking movies and you want to join us in talking movies, we'd love to have you join our community. Consider hitting that subscribe button before you make your way out. As always, guys, thank you so much for hearing me out, and I hope to talk to you guys again real soon.